Chapter 3: Culture. Culture is one of the fundamental elements of social life, and thus a very important topic in sociology. Many of the concepts presented here will come up again in almost every subsequent chapter. You will need to keep these concepts in mind as you learn about other substantive areas. You will also want to think about how culture is relevant to the things you already know from your own life experience. Try to come up with some of your own examples as you read along. The subject of culture is probably inherently interesting to most people, but although culture is familiar to all of us, you should be seeing it in a new and different way by the time you finish this chapter. Culture encompasses practically all of human civilization and touches on almost every aspect of social life. It is so much a part of the world around us that we may not recognize the extent to which it shapes and defines who we are. In the broadest sense, we can say that culture is the entire way of life of a group of people. It can include everything from language and gestures to style of dress and standards of beauty, from customs and rituals to tools and artifacts, from music and child rearing practices to the proper way for customers to line up in a grocery store. It forms the basic beliefs and assumptions about the world and the way things work, and it defines the moral parameters of what is right and wrong, good and bad. Although culture varies from group to group, all societies develop some form of culture. It is the human equivalent of instinct in animals. Although we humans do have some basic instincts, culture actually accounts for our great success as a species. We are totally dependent on it to deal with the demands of life and society. As culture develops, it is shared among members of a group, handed down from generation to generation, and passed along from one group or individual to another. Material culture is any physical object to which we give social meaning. Art and artifacts, tools and utensils, machines and weapons, clothing and furniture, buildings and toys. The list is immense. Any physical thing that people create, use, or appreciate might be considered material culture. Examining material culture can tell us a great deal about a particular group or society. Just look around you. Whether in your dorm room, a library, a coffee house, or a park, there should be many items that you can identify as belonging to material culture. Start with your own clothes and accessories, and then extend your observations to your surroundings: the room, building, landscaping, street, neighborhood, community, and further outward. For instance, the designer label on a woman's purse might convey that she follows the current fashion trends, or the athletic logo on a man's t-shirt might tell us that he is into skateboarding. Likewise, the carpeting, light fixtures, furniture, and artwork in a building can tell us something about the people who live or work there. In the sports arenas, modes of transportation, historical monuments, and city dumps reveal the characteristics of a community. Perhaps the proliferation of drive-through fast food restaurants in practically every corner of the United States says something about American tastes and lifestyle. We spend more time on the road, cook fewer meals at home, and prefer the ease and predictability of knowing what we'll get each time we pull up to our favorite chain. If you are visiting another country, you might see some very different items of material culture. Studying the significance of material culture is like going on an archaeological dig, but learning about the present rather than the past. Symbolic culture, or non material culture, reflects the ideas and beliefs of a group of people. It can be something as specific as a certain rule or custom, such as driving on the right side of the road in the United States and on the left side in the United Kingdom. It can also be a broad social system, such as democracy, or a large scale social pattern, such as marriage. Because symbolic culture is so important to social life, let's look further at some of its main components. One of the most important functions of symbolic culture is to allow us to communicate through signs, gestures, and language. These form the basis of social interaction and are the foundation of culture. Signs or symbols, such as a traffic signal, price tag, notes on sheet music, or product logo, are something designed to meaningfully represent something else. They all convey information. Numbers and letters are the most common signs, but you probably are familiar with other graphic symbols indicating, for instance, which is the men's or women's bathroom, whether the elevator is going, how to eject a DVD from the disk drive, or in what lane you should be driving. While we can easily take for granted the meaning of most symbols, others we may have to learn when we first encounter them. Gestures are signs made with the body, clapping, nodding, smiling, or any number of facial expressions. Sometimes these acts are referred to as body language or nonverbal communication since they don't require any words. Gestures can be as subtle as a knowing glance or as obvious as a raised fist. Most of the time, we can assume that other people will get what we are trying to say with our gestures. But while gestures might seem natural and universal, just a matter of common sense, few of them, besides those that represent basic emotions, are innate. Most have to be learned. For instance, the thumbs up sign, which is associated with praise or approval in the United States, might be interpreted as an obscene or insulting gesture in parts of Asia or South America. Every culture has its own way of expressing praise and insulting others. So before leaving for a country whose culture is unfamiliar, it might be worth finding out whether shaking hands and waving goodbye are appropriate ways to communicate. Just to give one example of how these practices can differ from culture to culture, in many parts of Africa and the Middle East, it is considered normal for men to hold hands in friendship. How would Americans react to these two shoulders? Generally, we think of our own culture as being the normal one, a belief known as ethnocentrism. We don't realize that culture is something learned and that there is nothing inherently better about ours. Ethnocentrism means that we use our own culture as a kind of measuring stick with which to judge other individuals or societies. Anyone outside our group seems off center or abnormal. As sociologists, we want to have a clear view of any society as possible. This requires that we suspend, at least temporarily, our ethnocentrism. There are several ways to do this. One way is to take an approach known as beginner's mind, which is a practice based upon setting aside your biases. Another practice that can discourage ethnocentrism is to regularly experience the shock of visiting other cultures. Ultimately, the idea is to have an attitude of cultural relativism, which means seeing each different culture as simply that, just different, not better or worse, not right or wrong, but on its own terms. Doing so helps us place different values, beliefs, norms, and practices within their own cultural context. By practicing cultural relativism, or being culturally sensitive, we begin to see others more clearly and without judgment. Language, probably the most significant component of culture, is what has allowed us to fully develop and express ourselves as human beings, and it is what distinguishes us from all other species on the planet. Although language varies from culture to culture, it is a human universal and present in all societies. It is one of the most complex, fluid, and creative symbol systems. Letters or pictograms are combined to form words, and words are combined to form sentences in an almost infinite number of possible ways. Language is the basis of symbolic culture and the primary means through which we communicate it with one another. It allows us to convey complicated abstract concepts and to pass along a culture from one generation to the next. Language helps us to conceive of the past and to plan for the future, to categorize people, places, and things around us, and to share our perspectives on reality. In this way, the cumulative experience of a group or people, their culture, can be contained in and presented through language. Language is so important that many have argued that it shapes not only our communication, but our perception, the way that we see things, as well. In the 1930s, two anthropologists, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf, conducted research on the impact of language on the mind. In working with the Hopi tribe in the American Southwest, the anthropologists claimed to have discovered that the Hopi had no words to distinguish the past, present, or future, and that therefore they did not see or experience time in the same way as those whose language provided such words. The result of this research was the development of what is known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, sometimes referred to as the principle of linguistic relativity. Their hypothesis broke from traditional understandings about language by asserting that language actually structures thought, that perception not only suggests the need for words with which to express what is perceived, but also that words themselves help to create the same perceptions. The studies by Sapir and Whorf were not published until the 1950s when they were met with competing linguistic theories. In particular, the idea that Eskimos, or Inuits as they are now called, had many more words for snow than people of Western cultures was sharply challenged, as was the notion that the Hopi had no words for future or past tense. Although there is still some disagreement about how strongly language influences thought, the ideas behind the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis continue to influence numerous social thinkers. Language does play a significant role in how people construct a sense of reality and how they categorize the people, places, and things around them. Values and norms are symbolic culture in thought and action. When we know the values of a particular group and see how individuals are controlled by its social norms, then we can appreciate their beliefs and ideals and find the evidence of these throughout their everyday lives. Values are the set of shared beliefs that a group of people consider to be worthwhile or desirable in life. What is good or bad, right or wrong, beautiful or ugly? They articulate the essence of everything that a cultural group cherishes in society. For instance, most Americans value the equality and individual freedoms of democracy. Structural functionalists such as Durkheim stress the strength of shared values and their role in regulating the behavior of society's members. However, there is not always widespread agreement about which value should represent a society, and values may change or new values may emerge over time. For example, workers' loyalty to their company was once much more important than it is now. In today's economy, workers realize that they may be downsized in times of financial trouble, or that they may change careers over the course of their lifetime and hence feel less obligation to an employer. Norms are the rules and guidelines regarding what kinds of behavior are acceptable. They develop directly out of a culture's value system. Whether legal regulations or just social expectations, norms are largely agreed upon by most members of a group. Some norms are formal, which means they are officially codified and explicitly stated. These include laws such as those making it illegal to speed in a school zone or drink before you turn 21. Other formal norms include the rules for playing basketball or the requirements for membership in your college's honor society, the rights secured by the amendments to the Constitution, and the behavioral prescriptions conveyed in the Ten Commandments. Despite the relative authority of formal norms, they are not always followed. Other norms are informal, meaning that they are implicit and unspoken. For instance, when we wait in the line to buy tickets for a movie, we expect that no one will cut in front of us. Informal norms are so much a part of our assumptions about life that they are embedded in our consciousness. They cover almost every aspect of our social life, from what we say and do, and to even how we think and feel. Though we might have difficulty listing all the norms that are part of everyday life, most of us have learned them quite well. They are simply the way things are done. Norms can be broken down further into three types: Folkways are the ordinary conventions of everyday life about what is acceptable or proper and not always strictly enforced. Folkways are the customary ways that people do things, and they ensure for smooth and orderly social interactions. Examples are standards of dress and rules of etiquette. In most places, wearing flip-flops with a business suit and eating with your fingers from the buffet line is just not done. When people do not conform to folkways, they are thought of as peculiar or eccentric, but not necessarily dangerous. Mores are norms that carry a greater moral significance and are more closely related to the core values of a cultural group. Unlike folkways, uh, mores are norms to which practically everyone is expected to conform. Breaches are treated much more seriously and in some cases can bring severe repercussions. Such mores as the prohibition of theft, rape, and murder are also formalized so that there is not only public condemnation for such acts, but also strict laws against them. Taboos, actually a type of moray, are the most powerful of all norms. We sometimes use the word in a casual way to indicate, say, a forbidden subject, but as a sociological term, it holds even greater meaning. Taboos are extremely serious. Sociologists say that our sense of what is taboo is so deeply ingrained that the very thought of committing a taboo act, such as cannibalism or incest, evokes strong feelings of disgust or horror. Can you identify the chief financial officer of three major corporations? How about the name of the server at three local hangouts? How many books do you own? How many social media sites do you visit? Is your family listed on the social register? Have you ever heard of the social register? In each pair, one type of knowledge is considered high culture and the other low culture. This could be considered stereotyping by economic class rather than by race or gender, but sociologists use the term high culture to describe the pattern of cultural experiences and attitudes that exist in the highest or elite class segments of a society. People often associate high culture with intellectualism, political power, and prestige. In America, high culture also tends to be associated with wealth. Events considered high culture can be expensive, formal, and exclusive. Attending a ballet, seeing a play, listening to a live symphony performance, or attending a prestigious university. Similarly, low culture is associated with the pattern of cultural experiences and attitudes that exist in the lower segments of society. The term popular culture refers to the pattern of cultural experiences and attitudes that exist in mainstream society. Popular culture events might include a parade, a baseball game, or the season finale of a television show. Music, anime, and cosplay are pieces of popular culture. Popular culture is accessible by most and is expressed and spread via commercial and social media outlets such as radio, television, movies, industry publishers, corporate run websites. You can share a discussion of favorite football teams with a new coworker or comment on a reality show when making small talk in line at the grocery store. But if you tried to watch, but if you tried to launch into a deep discussion on the classical Greek play Antigone, few members of U.S. society today would be familiar with it. Although high culture may be considered by some as superior to popular culture, the lines between high culture and popular culture vary over time and place. Shakespearean plays, considered to be popular culture when they were written, are now part of society's high culture. 500 years from now, where our descendants consider Dancing with the Stars a fine performance art, a subculture is just what it sounds like, a smaller cultural group within a larger culture. People of a subculture are part of the larger culture but also share a specific identity within a smaller group. Thousands of subcultures exist within the US. Ethnic and racial groups share the language, food, and customs of their heritage. Other subcultures are formed through shared experiences. Biker culture revolves around an interest in motorcycles. Some subcultures are formed by people who possess traits or preferences that differ from the majority of society's population. The body modification community embraces aesthetic additions to the human body, such as tattoos, piercings, and certain forms of plastic surgery. But even members of a subculture, but even as members of a subculture band together, they still identify with and participate in the larger society. Sociologists distinguish subcultures from countercultures, which reject some of the larger culture's norms and values. In contrast to subcultures, which operate relatively smoothly within the larger society, countercultures might actively defy larger society by developing their own set of rules and norms to live by, sometimes even creating communities that operate outside of greater society. Counterculture members are against the dominant ruling culture and want to install their own values. Subculture members may want to change some things, but established procedures are followed. Cults, a word derived from culture, are also considered a countercultural type of group. The group Yearning for Zion in El Dorado, Texas, exited existed outside the mainstream and the limelight until its leader was accused of statutory rape and underage marriage. The sex formal norms clashed too severely to be tolerated by U.S. law, and in 2008, authorities raided the compound and removed more than 200 women and children from the property. Many cults claim to be spiritual, often establishing themselves as a religion. When each of the three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, in the world began, they were originally treated as cults. These players are a distinct subculture, a smaller cultural group within the larger culture in the United States. And within the larger subculture are subgroups, such as this one, emulating DC Comics characters. Coined by sociologist William F. Ogburn in 1957, the term culture lag refers to the time that passes between the introduction of a new item of material culture and its social acceptance. Culture lag can also cause tangible problems. The infrastructure of the US, built 100 years ago or more, is having trouble supporting today's more heavily populated and fast paced life. Yet there is a lag in conceptualizing solutions to infrastructure problems. Municipalities struggle with traffic control, increased air pollution, and limited parking, which are all symptoms of culture lag. Although people are becoming aware of the consequences, overuse, or lack of resources, addressing these needs takes time. Actually patented in 1893 as the quote, clasp locker on the left, the zipper did not diffuse through society for many decades. Today, it is immediately recognizable around the world. One way material and non material culture crosses borders is through diffusion. Like a gas in a laboratory experiment, the item or idea spreads throughout. Diffusion relates to the process of the integration of cultures into the mainstream, while globalization refers to the promotion and increases of interactions between different regions and populations around the globe, resulting in the integration of markets and interdependence of nations fostered through trade. Ideas, concepts, or artifacts are often diffused or spread to individuals and groups, resulting in new social practices. People might develop a new appreciation of Thai noodles or Italian gelato. Access to television and the internet has brought the lifestyles and values portrayed in U.S. sitcoms into homes around the globe and vice versa. Twitter feeds from public demonstrations in one nation have encouraged political protesters in other countries. When this kind of diffusion occurs, ideas from one culture are introduced into another, often before the associated material objects. The graph above displays when diffusion typically occurs, essentially driving an innovation to spread beyond its earliest adopters to the wider majority of people. Sociologist Everett Rogers developed a model of the diffusion of innovations. As consumers gradually adopt to a new innovation, the item grows towards 100% usage or complete saturation within a society. This graph is frequently used in business, sales, technology, and cultural innovations. It can be used to describe how quickly different groups adopt or begin using a new technology or a new slang word. But note it is just a framework. Not every innovation follows this pattern, but it provides a good foundation for discussion and prediction. One great example is the zipper. Officially patented in 1893 as the clasp locker, the zipper did not diffuse through society for many decades. Today it is immediately recognizable around the world. Sometimes external observers may believe that people from a culture dress a certain way based on images from a parade or special event. In reality, these two people may wear business suits or jeans and t shirts when they are not participating in a flower parade. While people may not always outwardly express their cultural identity or use items related to their culture, special events often bring out those expressions.